wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Google Hangout in our continuing series here at DevOps.com, highlighting some of the most interesting speakers and sessions and topics in DevOps at this month's IBM InterConnect conference in Las Vegas. Really happy to have what I consider an all-star cast today. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves because it's Google Hangout and it's interactive. So first, Hayden, why don't you go first and just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Hayden Lindsey. I'm in IBM, formerly of the Rational Division, now in the Z System Software Group with the reorg that occurred about a month ago. And I'm responsible for what we call DevOps for enterprise systems, which focuses on the unique challenges and opportunities around DevOps for our clients that have substantial investments in the system of record arena, which in many cases are applications running on the mainframe or Z systems.
Excellent. And Mike, we'll just go in order. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, my name is Mike Fulton. I'm the CTO for DevOps for Enterprise Systems, and spend a lot of my time getting out talking to customers about the practical ways to actually get started with DevOps, especially on System Z.
Absolutely. And then last but certainly not least, Slavik, how about yourself?
Yes, Slavik Zorin. I'm the CEO of Synchrony Systems. We are a company who primarily specialized for quite some time now in enterprise application modernization, and most recently with an advent and the sort of the rise of DevOps, we have made appropriate changes and adaptations of this offering as well, and we're also similarly are introducing to the enterprise ways to rapidly deploy a DevOps solution in the context of enterprise application modernization.
Sure. So guys, I wanted to focus a little bit today talking about systems of records as being as important as systems of engagement. This was an article that we actually had on DevOps.com a few months ago, written by Rosalind Radcliffe from IBM. But it was a great article, but it's also a great topic for us to dive into. I always like to tell people that we live in an age where technology is being pushed and pulled and shaped by several megatrends. And these megatrends right today are mobility and mobile, cloud, of course, and then big data. But that, and they are real trends. There's no getting around it. I'm interested in your thoughts. But that doesn't mean that we're throwing out everything we've done over the last 40 to 50 years regarding technology and things like mainframes, etc. And I think one of the challenges we hear about is how do we keep this stuff relevant? How do we maintain our investment in this age of mobility, cloud, and big data? Is there still a place for all of this great technology we've built up over 40, 50 years? Hayden, that's a big part of your job right now. What do you think?
Yes.
That was a simple answer. All right, 3, 4 questions though, but let's discuss.
Right. So, okay, I'm a smart ass sometimes. All right. No, it's absolutely relevant. However, and so we talk about CAMs, cloud analytics, mobile, social, and security, or you can talk big data and mobile and cloud, whatever. The fact is there are always going to be trends, megatrends, what have you, that present opportunities if embraced in a timely manner relative to the competition, and of course those things are problems if you don't. But these are the hot ones these days. They certainly represent some very, very, very interesting opportunities. And the fastest way by far for enterprises that have substantial investment in their system of record applications is to leverage them in the new context. But in order to do so, you can't leave things the way they are. And so that's what, when we talk about DevOps for enterprise systems, it's about changing in order to remain relevant. If you don't change things, you will become obsolete, and that's not in anyone's best interest, because you can't afford to reinvent the wheel every time some new initiative or trend comes about. Sure.
I mean, Slavik, I know you might have some thoughts on that one.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this is a great segue for me, what just Hayden said, because being in the business of taking systems that ran, for example, under older programming languages, but however on a very robust platform such as the IBM Z and I platform, we're finding that a lot of customers actually, for all sorts of reasons, want to continue running certain very important software assets on those platforms still. So the question came to us is, how do you do that? What is the best value propositions for those customers to modernize and yet both retain the value, the security, the scalability, and all of the things you get from the host environments that are where those enterprise applications are deployed today, and yet be relevant, and yet enable systems of engagement? And so what we have been doing in the context of DevOps, so we've been basically taking the online portions of those systems and moving them to the web, deploying them on the cloud, and allowing the systems of engagements to kind of get that deployment more rapidly with some of the important systems. So kind of basically in a nutshell, we would say take an important system that gives you value today where you want to get more mileage out of it if that system was running on the cloud or certainly on the web. We're going to rapidly transform it in the process, introduce for you the process or the methodology called DevOps, continuous builds, continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous release, service virtualization, all of those things that right now we have under IBM Off Stack. And so again, just like to echo what Hayden said, this is about getting strategic but important things off the ground and hitting the ground running, while at the same time retaining all of the initial investments and all of the value that you have in the enterprise systems today.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Grab a piece, a particular application, particular component of your system, and start working on how to improve it. You don't have to take your entire end-to-end system and try and fix it overnight. Grab the pieces that you think are most critical and start figuring out how you can improve your ability to develop, ability to test, how to improve the speed that you can put out your code. A lot of very basic problems, like I do my builds in the night and I need to run my tests, and it's taking more than a night to run my tests. How can I get in there, reduce the amount of time it takes to do this? How can I understand the process, speed it up? Those are things that the systems of record folks can really learn from systems of engagement. Take a look at some of the processes, some of the methodologies they've got, and start applying them where appropriate to the systems of record applications, and figure out how to develop them better and faster.
I agree, but you know what, Mike? You spoke about speed, and there are some people who say, "Oh, there's no way these old systems are going to be up to the speed of my cloud. I got bare metal servers and I got all of the Blue Mix, and how are they going to? How's the Z system going to keep up with that?" But I have a premise that not everything needs to run at the same speed, right? I learned this from that fellow Carmen over at Nationwide, Carmen Diado. I call it variable speed DevOps. Guys, and I think that's an important thing. It's not that everyone runs at the same speed. It's that we ease through bottlenecks and constraints and we orchestrate. Yeah. And to me, that's key. I mean, Hayden, what are you guys seeing over there?
Well, I certainly think, Nationwide is a great example of enterprise company that has embraced DevOps, and they did so back even before, at least certainly before I knew there was a DevOps movement 5 or 6 years ago. But that's how we describe it now, and they have tremendous, success. They're a tremendous success story. But my view is that the back-end system of record things, we're coming from a place, most clients are coming from a place where they're using decades-old technology, there is tremendous low-hanging fruit, and the first objective should be to sort of operate at DevOps speed for deployments to a test environment. Forget about production for now. You know, production upgrades, yes, they will need to be synchronized, but you know, with a well-done architecture, the systems of engagement and systems of record apps can be decoupled to a reasonable degree, which can also decouple the delivery cadence in many cases. But there's no reason not to set the bar that the systems of record teams are shooting for at exactly the same pace. It just may be that it's not even necessary to update your core banking app, you know, or your, you know, whatever the back-end app is. It may simply not need to have the same frequency of delivery to production, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't have the capability to do so if a hot fix is needed, for example. Right. So I think, practically speaking, what Carmen said is absolutely true, but we should establish a bar that says we could if we needed to, because we don't know how things are going to change in the future. But
because if you don't set the bar, if you don't set the bar, your competitor is going to, and so you're going to need to be able to move reasonably fast. And you're completely right. I like the variable speed notion you brought up. That, you know, that's a reality. You need to be able to separate apart the systems of engagement, systems of record, be able to build them independently, be able to test them independently. But you also need to be able to increase your efficiency. You have to increase your efficiency in all parts of your system, and systems of record is no exception.
Let me be a little efficient here myself. You know, we're going to be taking questions from the audience on Twitter. If anyone would like to follow along, we're at hashtag IBM InterConnect, if you'd like to ask a question on Twitter that we could bring up. But let's jump back in here. You know, all of us, all of you are speaking at InterConnect in areas related to what we've been talking about. And we're going to have, I understand, Hayden, there was some recent new Z13 announcements. But what I wanted to bring it back to was the idea of they're not mutually exclusive, and you know, we can make one as fast as we possibly can. We can keep doing our cloud stuff. But really, for me, it's about hybrid cloud, right? And I think, at least for the foreseeable future for us, that's where the action is, right? I don't think anyone's moving 100% to the cloud, and there aren't a lot of companies who are going to say, I'm not going to move anything to the cloud. But there's going to be hybrid. Slavik, I'm sure that's probably what you're seeing in your company an awful lot. Yeah? I think Slavik might be on mute.
Not anymore? Okay. Not anymore. Yes, so indeed that is the case, and I think you kind of sometimes have to lead by example, if you will. We internally are big consumers of the cloud right now, and even for us, the solutions that we provide are hybrid solutions. There is a platform we call MLP, stands for Modernization Lifecycle Platform, where all of the engagements are transparently conducted. And it is now a combination of a cloud platform that gets provisioned dynamically, and I'll talk a little bit about more when I have an opportunity, as well as obviously other solutions that are potentially our desktop and maybe run as plugins in the Eclipse environment. So that's one, you know, perspective. Even ourselves, how we have to modernize and how we have to adopt our own practices in the way that we interact with customers today. And the practical example, and I will hopefully will touch upon that a little bit further during this talk, is obviously our experience on putting an application, a pilot application for Bay Area Rapid Transit, that the system that's their mission critical system that manages status of train cars, and we, using Bluemix and the DevOps capabilities in Bluemix, were able to put together a pretty complex, but pretty nice, useful mobile pilot application for them in production, running on Bluemix as a cloud mobile application and with an infrastructure, new infrastructure like Node.js, for example, while talking to on-premise database behind the firewall in a secure fashion, using things like consumable services that are published on Bluemix called, for example, cloud integration, mobile backend integration, and things like that. So yes, we're seeing the hybrid cloud adaptation as a big movement right now in IT.
Sure. Hayden, you know, I wanted to go back to the mainframe and some of the things that we're doing. IBM is leading the way probably in terms of working in hybrid clouds and with newer technologies. I know you're doing a session with, is it Kurt Vigner from Forrester?
Kurt Bittner, yes.
Yeah, and you know, and that touches on this. Do you want to give us a quick little synopsis maybe about what we might be learning there?
Well, yeah, so actually it's Kurt who's going to talk about some DevOps best practices that, based on some research that Forrester has done, he's come up with, you know, here are 8 best practices around DevOps. And then I'm going to do a talk that tries to map some of the DevOps best practices in the enterprise context to, you know, in some of the solutions we have to support that, to his best practices. And actually then Mike, who's on this Hangout, going to do a bit of a demo, and then we'll talk about what's new. So we're trying, you know, one of the things that is, well, can't be overlooked is that, you know, you're not going to mature in, you know, the DevOps arena by just popping in a new tool or two. You really have to adapt your development processes. You have to adapt the culture. And oh yeah, you probably don't want to be using, you know, green on black ISPF to do your development, or, you know, decades old source management systems or what have you. You need to employ new tools in order to support the new practices and support a culture of innovation and, you know, speed and agility and so forth. And so that's what we'll talk about, and sort of the premise, or the, I guess, the question that I pose at the start of my portion of the talk is, you know, we've got all of these unicorns, in DevOps parlance, you know, the people that, you know, the born-on-the-web companies that, you know, have eye-popping statistics about, you know, how frequently they deploy into production, like Amazon doing it every 11.6 seconds. And, you know, you see this, and it would be not unexpected for our enterprise clients who've been maybe doing more traditional waterfall development using these quite old tools and processes to think that's just a bridge too far, it's unattainable, and therefore let me disregard it. And, you know, the question I pose is, can these horses, if you will, the traditional companies, cross the chasm and become unicorns? And in fact, there are a growing number of examples of clients that have done this, like Target, like Nationwide, many others. But we've got to give people confidence to begin moving in this direction, and then figuring out, you know, all right, let me bite off this small amount first. And sort of like what Mike was commenting on earlier, you can't, not only should you not, but you cannot do it all at once. So where do you get started and gain some successes, gain some confidence? And as I said, for the mainframe space, focus on a test environment first. Let's don't even talk about production, because that might freak people out. And then down the road, we might bring production into the conversation. But so anyway, that's sort of what we're going to be talking about, and it's really almost a sort of a teaser for the many more sessions that we'll have that will go into much greater detail in each of the areas.
We're going to try, actually, Hayden, we're going to try at the end here to put up something with, or we'll put it on Twitter and we'll put it up on DevOps.com, all of the sessions that all 3 of you are on. But speaking of horses to unicorns, who would think Bart, right? Bay Area Rapid Transit, whatever it stands for. Who would think of BART as a unicorn? But Slavik, you guys have done some amazing transformations over there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, so this is not uncommon. I mean, we have the application actually that eventually ended up having its sort of a, what do I call it, just another, an add-on mobile application, if you will, but the original one as well has undergone some modernization because it would run on an all windowing sort of a, but also desktop GUI environment, and it required modernizations. They needed to integrate the systems with other internal systems of record, actually. And so, and those systems of record were also newer, some off the shelf, so they needed to really, and they were web-based. So it was important for them to move to the web, and that was one of their initial parts of the modernizations, to get their mission-critical system to the web. And so that was our initial engagement with them, and then subsequently after that, where mobile and the operational side of things, it became interesting to, as the workforce there, you know, sort of the business often drives that. That's really sort of the case, because more and more in today, just like most of us are sitting there, not all of us, but most of us are sitting there and working from remote locations, from our houses, from anywhere, from Starbucks, you know, the mobile workforce progressively became mobile. I should say the workforce there progressively is becoming mobile, even in an organization like that. So the demands on having something in your hands, something more portable, is clearly there, and we're seeing that in, you know, all across the board. And really, that's the need, and that's the reason that that pilot project was born altogether. And as I mentioned it at last year's Innovate, it was confluence of events couldn't be more perfect, because IBM just released Bluemix platform, the platform as a service solution, and it just was a perfect place for us to do all of that. You know, really a project like that would start, you know, in April and actually be fully functional with live demonstrations in early June is quite staggering, to do something at such speed. And that was a perfect example how, if you know, kind of marry the, you know, the combination of cloud, the platform as a service, but at the same time also they built-in DevOps and application lifecycle capabilities that now you have access from Bluemix, you're able to do something like that, you know, in a matter of, you know, like we said, 15 days as opposed to working at it for 6 months.
Absolutely. And you know, I just want to mention, you know, back to our original hooking mainframe and Z system technology to call it modern or ultra-modern cloud kind of stuff, that is part of that BART story as well. And Slavik, you, if I'm not mistaken, that is the subject of one of your InterConnect sessions, isn't it?
It is. One of the sessions, I think, is going to be on Tuesday, and it's going to be a technical breakout session. We will show some code. People like to come and take a look at how this thing is put together. We will show the composite services capabilities. We will absolutely spend a significant amount of time showing the DevOps portion of the platform. Really, it's really sort of the JazzNet and the whole, what now is called, I think, IBM DevOps Services. And all of the capabilities and how these things are integrated, how they're built, the application. We will run it as well, so you will see the mobile app running against an on-premise database. So that's the intent of that session. And then also a session at the end of the conference on Thursday, when we talk about our platform for continuous modernization, what we call. We will also mention some of the other customers as well, not sure if by name, but certainly by reference and projects, whereas there really are kicks and the big, you know, 30 to 70 big enterprise systems that also have undergone a transformations, whereas they're right now running on the web with WebSphere, using Kix Transaction Gateway to get access to the services still running in COBOL that they rely on. So this hybrid architecture is also quite important, you know, to mention, and we're mentioning that as well in the session on Thursday. I think it's going to be at 1 o'clock, called Platform for Continuous Modernization. And finally, I know there's going to be a panel on DevOps. I'm not sure exactly what that date is, but there's going to be a panel which talks about mobile to mainframe and the DevOps best practices. So that is going to be another session during the conference. Yes.
As I mentioned, we'll have all these sessions and links to them up on DevOps.com, as well as the InterConnect site and social media following the Hangout. But let me turn the, for people listening out there who say, oh, this sounds great, yeah, I'd love to not have to throw out the millions of dollars we've invested over the years in mainframe technologies and stuff. But we're making it sound easy. Mike, is it that easy? Can you give us a little background on really what we're talking? Nothing's ever that easy.
No, it's a challenge, and like most programming tasks, it's a matter of breaking it into chunks and figuring out how you want to address each chunk, figuring out what priority you want to attach to different things. One of the things that we've heard from a lot of different customers is that they're really struggling with the first step in moving towards DevOps, in my opinion, which is how to be more reactive. And one of the stumbling blocks that they hit is testing. So the philosophy on systems of engagement is you make a change, you pump it through your test cases, that takes 7 minutes, and then you throw it out to the world, and life is wonderful. Well, on systems of record systems, a lot of the times it might take a day or a week to run through the test suites today, and if it takes that long, you've got a fundamental problem. So, one of the things we're looking into, and I'll talk a little bit about at InterConnect, is exactly how you can go and learn how your tests work, understand the tests, and really come up with ways to optimize it. So what we're calling test optimization. And not just test optimization for the build, but what it means for a developer to run his optimized tests through the system, what it means for a tester to focus on the key tests for changes in the system, and that can be a really important first step in moving from a very slow waterfall type model where it may take weeks to go through each stage of the cycle to a much more reactive mode where you can develop, deploy iteratively much faster. So
yeah, Mike, to your point, actually, I think there are a lot of clients that would be happy if they could get through their test suites in a day, because I was visiting with a client in Australia a few years ago, and they told me that it took them 16 days to go through their test bucket. Now, their test bucket obviously was not automated, and I congratulated them on having a test bucket. But the problem is, you can imagine that small batch delivery is out the window when it takes 16 days to go through the test cycle, because they don't know which test cases are testing which parts of the system, and they don't know if they have duplicates, which is another area of test optimization that you're looking at. And so you end up with large batches of changes, tremendous amount of waste, and human capital waste, time waste, delay in delivery, and so that ends up, I do believe, in many cases, that is where the biggest queue or the biggest bottleneck is. I was just with a client a week and a half ago, financial services, and they had 0 automation, and yet they have 2 people. I was really impressed. They have 2 people that have been designated as their DevOps champions, and so they've acknowledged that they need to go down this path. And in our conversations with them, it seemed fairly apparent that testing was, if not the area of low-hanging fruit, certainly one of the few areas of particular low-hanging fruit. So, but you know what? There are a lot of places that are entry points where people can get started. But yes, testing, if you can't, it's going to take days or weeks to get through your test bucket. It's going to be pretty hard to get to unicorn land.
Yeah, it's not the sexiest area in the world, but being able to focus in on that, make it faster, automate what you can, reduce the redundancy. In some cases, get your test cases into source code control, right? A lot of companies haven't got that type of thing done. So there's a lot of simple best practices, not necessarily simple to do, but simple to understand the benefit of them, and just get started.
Yeah, but back, Alan, back to your question, when you think about is it as easy as this sounds? The fact of the matter is, if you have a test suite that takes 16 days to get through, the element that's not easy is, where do I even start as far as beginning to automate? And it can be viewed as a daunting task, and so that's just one of the areas where, you know, we have to help people understand it's not an insurmountable problem. Get started, make progress, and, you know, when you look back, as Nationwide can do now, as can a number of enterprise customers these days, look back to where they were 5 or 6 years prior or 3 years prior, they'll be amazed at the progress that they've made. But it can be viewed as a mighty tall order. So, you know, it's not unexpected that people are skeptical, you know, and or intimidated about getting started in this space.
Yeah, but you know what, to Hayden, to your point, I think I've heard you say this in the past. The funny thing is that, you know, if you're a young programmer, well, maybe not here in the U.S., but in other parts of the world, it's actually more lucrative to learn how to do this on mainframe systems than it might be working on the latest Ruby on Rails or whatever your language of the day is that you want to, you know, these new systems are running.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that there's a lot of FUD out there, you know, and you know, so it's not uncommon for people who like to make money by generating some anxiety to say, well, you know, all the COBOL programmers or PL1 programmers are going to retire, and oh my goodness, how are you going to support those systems? And then suggesting a variety of alternatives to that. My view is COBOL is a programming language just like, you know, JavaScript or Java or Smalltalk, which is what I wrote for 10 or 12 years. You know, and by the way, I learned C code before that, going to work for IBM for one summer for about 10 weeks, and picked up Carnegie and Ritchie, and I read it, and I wrote 3,000 lines of code. You know, programmers learn programming languages. You know, let's don't create unnecessary FUD out there, but how, you know, yes, so they can learn COBOL, and it is in fact the case that the tables are turning, and from a financial point of view, having that in your resume actually will differentiate you from people that know, you know, half a dozen scripting languages. And that said, no person coming out of university who's going to have been using Eclipse to do their projects or some other comparable IDE, nobody wants to use ISPF. Which, for those who don't know what that is, it is a green screen editor, 24 by 80, green on black, 30 plus years old, and has no business being in existence by so many people, or used by so many people as it still is today. And so we need to give the young people that come into this craft and into this area that's, you know, has a bright future. We actually do this Master the Mainframe program and all this kind of stuff. And there are tens of thousands of students participating every year, but they don't want to use old tools. So we need to give a facelift to the interface, or what people see when building for the platform. The Z13 is the most, amazing machine on the platform. But if if it has a face that's 30 years old, it's hard for people to look past that.
Yep. Sometimes its beauty is skin deep when it comes to mainframes, then, huh?
Well, it's a cool-looking box. Have you seen the Z13? It's a nice-looking box. I think it looks really cool, actually, if you pull it up.
Yeah, but then if you want to interact with it, if you're having to use ISPF, then that interface to it is pretty...
Well, luckily you don't have to, though, Hayden. We have lots of alternatives.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what, guys? We had an article a few months back on DevOps.com, and it was COBOL, the language that won't die, and I forgot what they did an acronym for what it stands for. And it was one of our most popular articles. People, some people laugh, but it has been modernized, right? As Hayden said, a language is a language is a language. But if the tools and the interfaces to work on it with are modernized, it's just another language at that point of the game.
Yeah. any programmer worth their salt can pick up COBOL in a week. They really can. I mean, that's why it was so popular. It was designed to be an easy-to-use language, an easy-to-understand language. It's very human-oriented. But it's also important to note that you don't have to code in COBOL on the mainframe. We've got cutting-edge Java. We've got all the languages you would want to work in. The reality is there's a lot of COBOL out there. You're going to work with it too. But a lot of the new workloads are written in Java, running on WebSphere on the mainframes.
Well, let me just give you a little thought experiment here, since in some ways a lot of this here also right now kind of unscripted, right? Which is cool. I want to give you a little bit of a kind of anecdotal thing. In 1990, about that decade, early 90s, through coming to the Y2K arena, if you recall. I mean, this was, I was at that time in this hot OO language called Smalltalk. And I tell you, I had more people that I knew moved out temporarily for a good half a decade, and you know, Hayden, what I'm talking about, and they would move to basically Kix and COBOL environments to do Y2K. Why they did that? Well, there was a lot of economic advantages of being in the space of solving problems in the Y2K. I actually think that it is inevitable of what goes on right now. What is going on right now is that the modernization that right now Hayden and IBM is talking about around DevOps, and that it's sort of like the first thing you have to do is upgrade your tools. I mean, you got to use modern tools, right? Modern tools will take you and help you automate and help you take advantage of all of those things we're talking today on. But who is going to be really the consumer of those tools on a very large scale? It is going to be the new generation, perhaps millennials, perhaps maybe the Gen X, Y, right, still. And I think this is natural because I see this a lot in the business that we're at, that a lot of the new, or a lot of the organization that deals with interfacing to the old but very robust enterprise systems are sort of the new people in the company, right? Because the older people that have been there for 20, 30 years, they're not going to be there for another 20, 30 years. So I think it's only a natural consequence that a lot of the modern tools are, it's just a question of time, and those who are going to be embracing it proactively are going to be probably ahead of the game, most likely, right? Because they're going to be in the innovators, they're going to be the early adopters, and then you're going to have those that will follow in the mainstream. So again, if you just look at that whole Y2K transition, it was very interesting to see how even some of the high-end developers jump onto that bandwagon, because again, it was very economically interesting to be there and to solve those problems at that time.
Well, it's a flat world, and even programmers follow the dollar, Slavik.
No question about it.
It's a great example of it. Just real quickly, guys, we're at 2:38 East Coast time, so we've been on almost 40 minutes, and I wanted to remind anyone listening, if you do have any questions, you can ask them in the question slot. I think if you go to your top left, you might see in your screen, you'll see a QA, and they'll show up here, and we will try to get to them. But let us return back. Let me turn bigger to InterConnect, right? Guys, I don't know how much of our audience or the people who are going to listen to this afterwards really understand. I mean, this is a new InterConnect. This is certainly a bigger InterConnect, and a better one too. Hayden, as the VP in the group, why don't you tell our audience a little? I mean, just how big is InterConnect 2015?
Well, we're hoping it's going to be, 20,000 plus attendees, which is a mix of clients and prospective clients, business partners, analyst press, and of course other IBMers. Now, InterConnect is replacing 3 conferences that we did in the past that were aligned along some of the brands we had. So Pulse historically was in February, and that was the Tivoli or CNSI brands conference. Didn't mean others. I went there as a rational person, former rational person, but it was predominantly around, the Tivoli portfolio. Impact was generally in April, and that was the WebSphere conference, and then Innovate was the Rational conference. That's the one that I went to, and of course I went to Impact on every single year as well. And so there was overlap, and we end up having to give the same talks at the different conferences, and we just decided, hey, let's bring all this together. And of course, as it turns out, we no longer have those three divisions. We still have a WebSphere brand, Tivoli brand, Rational branded products, but we don't have those divisions any longer. And there's so much overlap, it just seemed like, do one big conference, cover things once. Now, sometimes we may end up having to give a talk twice because the venue is not large enough to seat everyone, but for the most part, it's more efficient for us. And we also think more important is it's more efficient for our clients who wanted to hear what the WebSphere folks were saying, but also wanted to hear what the Rational or Tivoli people were saying as well. And so go to Vegas and see it all. And only downside is we're so big, we have to be in the MGM and the Mandalay Bay. So we will get our exercise going between venues. But we're excited about it, and it's starting 2 weeks from this past Monday. So, and actually there's some activities on the Sunday prior. So whatever that is, the 22nd, I think.
Absolutely. And Hayden, having been to Vegas many times, that Mandalay Bay to MGM is, for anyone who needs their cardio or a good workout, that is a nice walk for sure. But hey, you get it both in at the same time. Slavik, I wanted to come back to you a little bit in whatever time we have left here. You're doing 2-3 different sessions, but you're not an IBMer, obviously. Talk a little bit about your relationship or your company's relationship with IBM, because obviously you know Hayden and Mike well. How does that work? I mean, it's when we talk about IBM, we think of a monolithic, big blue structure. But the fact is, you're walking, living proof that the strength of IBM in a lot of ways is the strength of its business partners. And I know we didn't discuss this previously, but want to throw it out at you.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I will say it's a symbiotic relationship for sure. IBM relies, and IBM can do a much better job, even in terms of numbers and charts, as to what percentage of their business is actually delivered by more local business partners. And this is so important when you're developing your channel, and everybody knows that. But I think what is so unprecedented, at least in our experience, when it comes to having a business partner like IBM, is that, just to give an example of, we've been able right now to move more rapidly than probably our competition into the DevOps platform and the DevOps stack, because we as a business partner are capable of having access to the entire software catalog of IBM and actually deploy a lot of the solutions internally based on those. So we, first and foremost, kind of we eat, sort of our own, not to be crude about it, exactly what we preach, we follow what we preach. So we first become experts by deploying this. So we have access to all the enterprise software, starting from the database and WebSphere, Tivoli products, and of course right now Rational products and things like Urban Code and what have you. And that has enabled us to be early adopters, as I just mentioned, and to build what we call today an integrated environment, whereas before it used to be a very siloed and specialized solution. And Hayden knows a lot about the difficulties about this business, where in not so recent past, I mean, the way migrations, which is what makes them so difficult, you used to deliver code. And we talk about here agility and just being able to build and deploy something. And everybody underestimated the difficulty of what it takes to take a system and this, massive amounts of source code, sometimes in millions, and try to just build it appropriately and rapidly. So imagine now, if you are undergoing some kind of a modernization of a system that's running in the older 4GL environment, let's say web, how do you build that? So that's one of the big advantages that we've had, is that we were able to utilize the whole JAS platform that IBM delivers, the whole ALM, application lifecycle management stack, the whole DevOps stack, and now with the advent of the cloud. And on top of this, we were able to integrate that as an entire solution. So from day one, we no longer just deliver to the customer source code. We deliver to the customer the actual solution. They are able to build, deploy. They are able to use DevOps actually from day one, from the very first delivery. We could not have done this, not in the same way, if we did not have the kind of relationship that IBM offers to its business partners, which is, again, real access to its software catalog, access to the support structures they have in place, the real tight relationship we've developed with Hayden's lab and other labs right now in Bluemix and Cloud. I mean, it's really magnificent, right? I mean, this is a lot of opportunities are out there for companies to probably listen to this and realize how beneficial it could be to develop this business partnership, because it's, like I said, it's a very symbiotic relationship.
We love our business partners, but we would love to have even more.
Exactly.
Never have too many partners.
No, you can't. Hey guys, I've got one more question for each of you, and we'll call it a wrap, unless we see any questions from audience. But besides your own session, what are you most looking forward to at InterConnect 2015? And you can't say the Aerosmith concert.
Well,
Mike, why don't you go first?
I'm looking forward to some of the new areas of technology that, when you're deep in the trenches every week, you don't get a chance to play with and see. So I really enjoy going down to the place where they got white coats. I don't know if they have the guys with the white coats this year, but going down there, seeing the new stuff that's coming out, the new technology, the new concepts that IBM and its partners have got, that's always really cool.
Yep, no doubt about that. Hayden, what about you?
Well, I will definitely be seeing Aerosmith, because I normally skip the entertainment because I don't generally find it, well, I won't disparage it. I will just say that Aerosmith is somebody that I want to see, number one. And number two, I end up getting my days filled with meetings with clients and business partners, and it's a great use of time, renewing relationships with partners, renewing relationships with clients, meeting new clients, and then seeing some interesting talks when I have a break in that. So, and yes, I like the white coat area just to see what kind of cool new stuff is coming down the pike. But I really enjoy the time to meet with clients and partners. And some people I only see once a year at an event like this, or it's every 2 or 3 years. And so, and I also think that happens to be one of the benefits to the attendees. They can interact with one another. IBM doesn't have to be in the middle of every conversation.
Slavik, how about yourself?
And certainly all the things we've heard I would echo, but I would also say that to me this particular conference is so interesting because we cannot always, every year, we would focus on the conference where we have most of our engagement areas at IBM. As we know, IBM is a very large organization, and it's important to focus on one. And sometimes we will go 1 or 2 conferences, but it's never very easy to make it to all 3 conferences, especially if you want to bring a team for smaller companies. And this is exciting right now to have, as Hayden explained, 3 brands, major areas to kind of unify. And now to hear the diversity of the customers who are going to be, you're going to see a lot that are more the newer echelon, where a lot of the web applications have been developed in cloud applications and WebSphere arena and whatnot, but you're also going to see now a lot of Z customers. And now I think that interaction is going to be spectacular. I think this is also, I'm guessing that's one of the other strategic reasons, not just to make it easy, but of course to make it easy for everybody else, but to finally have all of those people interact together and to see what can come out of that as well. So I'm excited, of course, to be finally also part in one time with all the mix of the participants that are now otherwise would have to come to the individual conferences.
Absolutely. I'm going to save the last one on that for me. What I'm so excited, and I will be there, what I'm really excited about is, as someone who kind of bought into the DevOps Kool-Aid 3 years ago and started DevOps.com about a year ago, I am just blown away that at a conference, even from a big player like IBM, we're going to have over 300 DevOps-related tracks, sessions, workshops, call them mini events, whatever you want to call it, with 300 DevOps-related sessions or things going on in the course of a couple of days. And if that doesn't, and we're sitting here talking about using DevOps on mainframes to clouds to hybrids and everything else, if that doesn't show you that DevOps is real and alive and here, I don't know what else does. So really looking forward to it. Hayden, you're the VP though. Everyone else seems to work for you. we're going to give you last word here on the Hangout, inviting people to interconnect.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's, for all the reasons we've said, it's should be an exciting conference. I think the difficulty will be determining which sessions you're going to skip because there's something else you want to go to. But I think it'll be a great event. We'll see. You know, I certainly figure I'm going to get plenty of exercise because I think it is about a 30 to 40-minute walk from meeting rooms in MGM to Mandalay Bay. But I think it'll be great. There's a lot of stuff on cloud and analytics and DevOps and mobile and just you name it, it's going to be there. And hopefully we have great attendance.
I hope so too.
And weather in Vegas in February, late February, is certainly better than it is in the Northeast at the moment.
Or Vancouver. Hey guys, we've got one question that just showed up. Sorry for showing up late. Would someone give me a major takeaway? Well, the good news is you'll be able to watch this whole thing on YouTube in about 2 minutes. But this fellow actually doesn't understand the difference between DevOps for mobile and DevOps for mainframe. And you know what, Mike? Is there a difference, or is DevOps DevOps?
I think there's some differences. I mean, the types of tools you're going to use are a little different. I think the general processes, the general understanding what DevOps is, I think is pretty similar. But how you go about it, how you attack it's different. You know, maybe one of the big differences is a lot of mobile apps may be newer than, say, a mainframe app. And so the fact that you've got potentially a lot of legacy code to contend with on a systems of record mainframe application versus probably a lot less on your systems of engagement, I think that can make some big differences in how you go about attacking the problem and transforming your application to use DevOps. But fundamentally, it's similar.
You've got 20 or 30 years worth of, you know, code and practices and culture and tools that need to be upgraded. So it's way less about greenfield development and using brand new tools and more about adapting from where they are today. Yeah. But as Mike said, it's absolutely correct that the concepts, the processes, the culture that you strive for are the same, but in most cases, clients are coming from a different place because the mainframe development started, you know, 2, 3, 4 decades ago, and that certainly was not when, you know, the prior version of that mobile app development was started.
Yeah. Certainly not.
It's a different problem, but there's more low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned, but also some unique challenges.
Yep. Okay, I think at that point then we're going to call it a wrap. Hayden, Mike, Slavik, thank you so much. Audience, thank you for listening in. Just a quick reminder, this will be available on YouTube in a couple moments, I believe. It'll be on our DevOps.com site as well in our special section called DevOps at InterConnect. And a listing of where these 3 gentlemen will be appearing at InterConnect 2015 will also be on the site as well. And you can follow along on hashtag IBM InterConnect on Twitter. Mike, Hayden, Slavik, thanks again very much. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com, and thank you for joining in today.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.